Hi, folks, and welcome again to what I'm pretty sure is the seventh in our series of Dharma Outreach, Dharma Talks. You've got to put up with me again, sat here, and Marshall next to me. And this week we're fortunate to have a special guest, our very good friend Tarrah. So, Tarrah, welcome and thank you for agreeing to join us.
Yeah, hi you guys. It's great to be with you. Happy to be here. I've been watching your shows, your Dharma TV, and it's good to be with you.
Great, great. Well, as usual, we have nothing planned, so we'll go our usual route. So, Tara, I'm going to start by just asking you how you actually come to find the Dharma, if you like. I'm going to be very specific and try not to use the word Buddhism.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, okay, that's a loaded question for me. So yeah, I wasn't a happy person. I wasn't a happy person, and I had a lot of unresolved stuff that I was walking around with, which we do, right? We walk around with a lot of stuff, and I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to be here anymore. And it's sort of pushed me down this like spiritual frenzied path of like reading the Bible and reading the like just all of it, just jumping in. And when I came across Buddhist teachings, like that someone said suffering exists, like just like admitting that suffering is part of this and it's not a mark of like if we're suffering that we're some sort of monster or we're some sort of outsider or we're some sort of alien, you know, just that someone was willing to admit that the human experience can be hard like immediately pulled me into it. And I this was back when the internet was not full of stuff, like it just wasn't full. There was not a lot on the internet. And so I started looking around for Buddhist places who might teach me some stuff. And I came across this little meditation center with a long history. And it was like in the next town over. And I'd been a professional cook, a restaurateur, and they needed a cook. Um, and I thought the best way to learn was to just jump in. And I literally like jumped ship from the life I had built to go here and work here and live in this community. And that's how I met the Dharma, I suppose. That's how I met the Dharma. But then it's like after that is all the exciting stuff, you know, like after that initial leap from curiosity. And yeah, and sometimes it's not been easy because when you find something that helps you, right? Like you think that's like the peak of the mountain, you know, somehow. And I really thought that all of Buddhism, all of Dharma was this one way that I had sort of been presented with. Turns out that's not true. That's not true at all. And that's part of what I want to tell people is that it's not just one way. There's a million ways that we can touch, get our fingers, dip our toes in, jump in to the Dharma, and not just like the formal capital D Dharma that we sometimes talk about in our groups. Graham and I hang out together a lot, but this like lowercase Dharma that encompasses sort of the whole world. So yeah, I was born from being miserable. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that you were looking into all sorts of spirituality
Mm-hmm.
because and you happened to find somewhere that was very appears to be very accepting of you.
Mm-hmm.
Marshall, I'm interested because that wasn't your experience when you tried, was it?
Oh, well, yeah. Um, with Buddhism for me was you know, and I really relate to Tarrah's story about like the suffering. And I dived in deep into like all these different religions, and I had like a lot of problems going on. I was facing a lot of time in prison, and you know, I never conceived that something could go so wrong. And I was always really good at getting myself out of messes, and I got myself in one I couldn't get out of, and I looked to find a solution to that. So that's where like that kind of that seeking and that curiosity about religion. And then there were people that told me, you know, about God and religion and what it was, and it didn't make sense. We all know what we got taught as kids about evolution, and it doesn't fit in the Bible. So all these questions began, like it got all, this pain and the suffering stirred it all up, just so to say. It stirred the mud up. And when I stumbled upon Buddhism after reading about like philosophy and religion and Eastern philosophies for a few years. And I stumbled upon Tibetan Buddhism, which I found fascinating. And I was really interested in reincarnation, and I was interested in all that other stuff that came with it, but it was very mystical. And to try to, I grappled with it because I struggled to really be able to form some type of spiritual practice out of the Tibetan, you know, Buddhism books that I was reading, because it was so rife with like mysticism and things of that nature. And then I found that this book by Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's a Theravadan Buddhist, which just means the old school Buddhism, and it was the Noble Eightfold Path, the way to end suffering. And I remember a friend of mine had offered it to me because he was Buddhist, and I said, I already read about that. And it was a very small book, so I was like, you know what, I'll read it. And at that point, the way that, you know, the Noble Eightfold Path and the Four Truths were laid out, you know, the first one being life is suffering, was done in a way where I could conceptualize it and understand it and implement it in my life. And then I remember like reading that book and being like, this is it. And like that was a personal experience. And then it expanded from there. And I would get involved in like the Buddhist things, you know, inside the prison. And I know what Sujatru's getting at is because so, you know, I studied the Pali Canons. I dove deep into esoteric Buddhism. Like I really dived deep, and this was after years of studying Eastern philosophy and things of this nature, just like out of like searching, pure curiosity. And yeah, when I came home and started getting involved in Buddhist groups, I struggled. I struggled as being a Dharma follower to find a place where I fit in, where I clicked, you know. And I was struggling on two levels because I was a human being without a community because I had changed my life. And I couldn't revert back to old bad behaviors. But I was also a person that had put a lot of effort and time into developing, you know, this knowledge and practice of Buddhism or Dharma. So, you know, the Buddhist recovery meetings I liked, but I struggled. You know, it would be like a church elder going to an AA meeting for some God. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it was great. I liked going and stuff, but I struggled to make that connection. And then I went to different temples and places and stuff, and you know, either they weren't open. If they were doing something, and I wasn't welcome. You know, it was in Boston mainly because that's where like the majority, and I was there in a halfway house. All the Buddhist temples and places are, and I remember I went to. You know, one place we did like a meditation, and like just like nobody really introduced themselves or talked to me, and like I wanted to talk to the teacher, but other people were talking to him, you know, so like I couldn't get in there. One was having a silent retreat. I walked in, and then they told me I had to leave because it was a silent retreat. They handed me some pamphlets. Even after I was like, yo, I just rode my bike here, you know what I mean? Like, 'cause that's all I had for transportation. One of them I went out, and it was Upton. It was I believe it was a Vipassana Insight Meditation Center, Theravadan, and the monk spoke broken English. I could understand, grasp what he was trying to explain. I'm sure a lot of other people couldn't. When I went to shake his hand, he pulled his hand away from me. It was an uncomfortable experience for someone like me because I'm a person that really likes to connect with people. I'm not really good at putting on a show or an act. And that was my introduction to Western Buddhism and society. So I became a lone wolf and just started working on myself and developing my life because I had to start from scratch. I started from the bottom. Now I'm here.
Thanks, Marshall. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just was trying to show the difference.
I want to stay there. Can we stay here for a minute? Right?
Sure.
Okay.
This is your 5 minutes of fame.
So,
we might even give you 10.
Marshall, I relate so much. That's one of the things that drove me to want to be a meditation teacher. Or I thought about, do I want to be a Dharma teacher? Because there's a difference, right, in the stories that are told. Or meditation teacher. It wasn't easy. I basically strong-armed my way. And I charmed my way into this job. And I'm forever grateful for the boss that I had at the time who gave me like a chance. Because back then you didn't get hired unless you had a wealth of Dharma experience. And I had absolutely none. I basically just put my heart on this application that at the time, it's no longer like this. Things are changing. I'm grateful for that. But at the time, you had to have 3 spiritual references to even be considered for this. I had 0 spiritual references. And so I charmed my way in by being honest, and I just happened to connect with this boss who was working there at the time, and I'm still in this place. I love this place a lot, but we have this joke. I get myself in trouble because I say I don't know how to. There's no filter, and we have these little quiet jokes that we tell in our tradition, this American Buddhism. We call it the upper middle way instead of the middle way, but that's a joke, and it's whispered, and we're not supposed to say it out loud, right? And I didn't know any better coming from the working class. For years, it's not the teachers, it's not the teachings, but it was like the practitioners around me who had world travel and double master's degrees and like all this Harvard intellectualism type of Buddhism that's the flavor. That's our flavor, right? I wasn't treated nicely, but I didn't know why. I thought there was something wrong with me. Like I thought there was something wrong with me that made people treat me kind of weird. And it took me over a decade to realize, oh no, that's classism. It's classism. That's what it is. And oftentimes, some of my coworkers and stuff, they would present like a classist action, like a classist sort of dynamic, as their Buddhist practice. That happened, and it took me a real long time to figure out, like, oh, actually, there's nothing wrong with me. There's just different class languages, and I don't quite fit into this one, and maybe people didn't know what to do with me. I'm not part of class language, which I'm really interested in. Graham knows this. The sort of upper class language is like, I'm okay. Like it's a stoicism that sort of says I'm okay all the time. And I'm like a 5-year-old kind of. I get excited and I cry and like I'm not very stoic, right? And yeah, there were some times I wasn't treated nicely, but I didn't even know how to name it. And that's one of the things that drove me to be a meditation teacher. That's how I met Graham, like all of this sort of, and I think this is important to name and to talk about, because we don't have to believe those stories, but we're not gonna, like, for me, it took me so long to figure it out. Like, I just want to tell people, like, you don't have to be afraid to this is for you too, like this stuff is for everyone. It's not just for a certain like pay level or whatever, and so I want to say this because this is related. If you're watching this and you do not have a lot of resources or money, like I don't, and you want to go on retreat and you want to go to these Dharma centers and you feel like you can't or you can't afford it, Call them and ask them for a scholarship. They're there. They're not always advertised, but they're there. Like, call them and ask for a scholarship if you want to go on to a retreat. There's all sorts of programs. Things are very much changing in these Buddhist centers, where they're no longer turning people away for lack of funds. And you might get there and you might get treated funky sometimes. Like, it might just happen, but this is for all of us. Like, it really is for all of us. And I think when you get involved with any spiritual organization, like, and you put your heart into it, there's going to be some heartbreak. Like, there's going to be some heartbreak, and it's a hard thing to go through, but ultimately it wakens us up. It wakes us up to what is true, and then we can make decisions based on how things really are, instead of some happy puppy love story that we might have thought about this thing that exists, you know, these organizations or whatever it is. But this is literally for all of us, and community has been so important to me. And it's like heartbreaking when, you know, it's like a circle of people with their elbows linked, and like, you're just not allowed in. Like, you're just not allowed in. But somewhere there's going to be a community that you're going to be allowed into, and it might very well change your life. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to sort of witness, or to feel unrepresented, or to feel like you're outside of something or not good enough. But none of those stories are true. They're just stories that someone made up, and now people are believing it, and we're living it out. But ultimately they're just stories. And God, I wish, it's like my life goal is like, how do I get us to know that? It's like my life goal is like, how do I get us to know that there's nothing wrong with us? There's just these weird stories that are being lived out, and they exclude people. But I do see things changing in that regard, and it makes me really happy. And I view this all now, after these 13 years of experience, as like a mandala. The Dharma is a mandala. It's not just like a tiny little, it's not like a gem or 3 gems. It's like this whole mandala, and there's a part in it for everyone. And there's someone who's going to have a voice. And so if you're interested in this stuff, and you get treated that way, just keep looking. If someone treats you that way, it's not the right community. Just move on. Go on to the next one. Because, yeah, this is for all of us. Sorry. This is a topic that's very close to my heart, you know?
And we really appreciate it, because, as you know, we're kind of, I'm not going to get on my soapbox today, but I promise myself, every one of these I do like a 2-minute rant. I'm not going to do that today. But yeah, we found it to be tough for exactly that reason. And I really appreciate you actually vocalising that for folks on here, because it is certainly for everyone. And I'm glad you mentioned the meditation teacher, because I was going to say you are in fact far more than I know your passion is being a Dharma cook. I know that, and I know you have issues that means you can't do that as much as you'd like. But you are much more than that. You've got vast retreat experience, and of course you are a certified meditation teacher of the very best kind, in my opinion, because you're catering to those folks that are on the outside, and that's wonderful. That really is.
Yeah, Tarrah, the work you do is amazing, and I can't sing your praises enough. And we're all representatives, kind of like I wouldn't say completely new, but almost, especially in like Massachusetts, and kind of like with this whole kind of like Western sphere bubble that's kind of hard to penetrate within like this cultural Buddhism, rich people Buddhism over here, upper middle class white people Buddhism, we're creating like another kind of like a bigger bubble outside that tiny little bubble. where other people can be able to, fit in. And it brings me to that story, reading these stories in the Pali Canon, how the Buddha treated people. He never deviated on his treatment of any human being. It was always the same. Treated every human being the same and offered every human being the opportunity to join the Sangha. And, and there was a big issue in his time about having women join the Sangha, and ultimately he decided, yeah, women can join the Sangha, homeless people. There's even a story about the Buddha hearing about a notorious murderer who had been, like a ravaging animal of a human being that had been terrorizing the countryside and had murdered, almost 100 people. And he seeked him out and was able to, talk some sense into this individual and invited him to join the Sangha. And that individual, they say in the canons, eventually became an arahant, a worthy one that was able to become enlightened, was able to transcend suffering. And throughout that whole ordeal, because he was hated so widespreadly hated, he while traveling around with the Buddha, I'm sure the other monks in the Sangha as well experienced a lot of criticism. And that one individual had rocks thrown at him, pot shards, rotten stinking food, and he tolerated that. And I think, from my knowledge and my experience of Buddhism, that's what I see. I don't see a rich person or a poor person. I don't see, people from different cultures or races. I see human beings that are suffering on some level, because, suffering exists, but it's a little bit different for all of us. And, I think the people that don't have the means to, provide themselves with some of the luxuries that others do are in more need of learning some of these principles and practices, so that, like this Angula Mala, which actually means a garland of fingers, because that's what he used to wear when he was a serial killer. He was at like the most severe, extreme state of suffering, and was able to learn the Dharma and tolerate the karma that he had accrued from his behavior. And not only was he able to tolerate it, but he was able to surpass it. And that's been my experience with Buddhism, internalizing it, is being able to not only tolerate the suffering that I experience as a person with substance use disorder and mental health problems, but gradually get better and better over time, like you yourself, like Mr. Sujatu Bhikkhu here. And like that's what we're doing, and that's why I think it's amazing, right? Because we're not living in $1 million home and donating money and showing up to a retreat every now and again, and our fancy Birkenstocks. We're talking to people that have no idea what Buddhism means or what Dharma means.
I think that's very true.
Sorry.
Sorry,
Can I add something to that?
you
Can
carry
I add
on.
something? Yeah, I just want to add that after, I grew up working class. It's a rough place to live for everyone who's involved in it. And I had all these feelings about who are like rich people, right? Like I had these feelings towards that. But I've spent some time around wealth now, and they suffer just as hard as any of us. And I really think that everyone's doing the best that they can within like the stories that they've been given and their childhood indoctrinations, all of it, like we're all doing the best that we can. But I think ultimately, like Sangha, that's like my jam, man. Like Sangha, when we do find a Sangha that we start to feel some acceptance in, like it's life changing. And I think that for that upper middle way too, like, right, they found these people who have the same language as them, and it's been cultivated over decades to be what it is today. But that, I don't know, it's all just like this learning experiment that everyone's doing. And even it makes me really proud to see this like Western Buddhism is starting to be incredibly aware of its own privilege, and I see all of these centers and all of these Dharma places working to be more inclusive, you know. But but I think it is important for people like us to exist on the outskirts and to invite, like, you guys work with people who they don't even need Dharma lessons, they just need someone to love them, and like, that's, you're amazing at that. And if that's not Dharma, I don't know what is. Like, right, if loving whoever is in front of you isn't Dharma, I don't know what is. So yeah, I want to make sure to not, I'm not trying to create some sort of separation. I wouldn't have said this a couple years ago, but heartbreak has taught me some lessons. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm aware time's marching on, and I just want to get something in, because I want to thank you publicly for that, I don't know, was it 14, 15 hour drive that you took from Western Mass to the middle of nowhere in Michigan. That was it's up there with my life-changing events, with 2 o'clock in the morning kitchen table Dharma. And also, if it wasn't for, I was pretty anti anything virtual, because I hadn't come all the way, this was my stance, was I hadn't come all the way from Thailand to sit in front of a screen. And so I want to thank you for not only showing me the benefits of virtual stuff, but I also still use your Zoom link.
You are so welcome.
I wanted to get that in before we. Tarrah, is there anything you're doing that you want to plug on here at all? If not, no problem. But if there's anything that's going on for you, that you want to plug on here while we're on, then please do so.
Yeah. So we get together a couple times a week. What I think of in my head is just Sangha Social on Tuesdays and Fridays. We just talk about life and we let the conversation roll where it does. And it's literally just time to be with our Sangha, and it's great. And it's at 7 to about 8. I'm not always there, but it's always open on those days. And then on Wednesdays, it's our Dharma date Wednesdays. And we're sort of sticking to like more formal topics about Dharma. You're invited to that. It's like 7 to 8:30ish. I assume we can put the Zoom link on the Dharma Outreach website if you want to come on any of those days. Or I would probably suggest a Wednesday first if you want to come hang out. And what we're doing right now is we're sticking to sort of a topic for a while, and we're actually, Sujato, we had this book club for the Prophet, and we're not reading the book together. We all have the book, but we're just using the table of contents as our topics of what to talk about. So we're starting that tonight, actually, and we'll be doing that for a while. So you're invited if you want to come. And everyone's welcome. Every single one is
right.
Is welcome.
And so, if anyone outside is interested in the Wednesday, where would they find the link? On your page, or would you post it on the Dharma Outreach page for us?
Yeah, on the Dharma Outreach website might be
website or the Facebook page.
I could put it on the website.
We can do both.
I could put it on the
Okay.
website. Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I got
Cool.
you. I got you, Tarrah.
Anything else? No.
No, thanks
Well,
for having me, guys.
that's kind of brought us nicely to the end of almost of our half an hour. I do feel there's so much more to that I'd like to hear you say.
I wish we had two more hours.
I'm going to put you on the spot and say, would you be up for doing this again sometime?
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you soon. Thanks.
Good seeing you, Tarrah, always.
Thank you very much, folks. So that's another 30 minutes. Another 30 minutes of our Dharma Outreach, Dharma Talks over with, and we'll have a new recording out in 2 weeks, I guess. So thank you all for joining us, and bye for now.